Chapter 74. This time, except for Jingwan, it took them 4 to 6 hours to rescue the others from the cliff. The main reason was that the terrain was too dangerous. Even if they used ropes to drop people down to save them, it was difficult to find a place to land. It was all thanks to the many monks of White Dragon Temple. Their lower bodies were solid and their strength was great enough. It could be said that they directly paved a human ladder. If it were other servants, they would have become weak before they could get down. In addition, Jingwan's carriage was at the outermost, sandwiched between 2 trees. The horse was hanging in midair. When all the people who were thrown out of the carriage were rescued, the horse had been hanged alive. If that was all, it would not be a big deal. However, Yuan Xiaoqiao and Zhou Shuang were still in the carriage. After such a long time, the roots of the 2 trees had been turned over from the soil. Even if the carriage was on the verge of collapse, the 2 of them shrank as much as possible to the back of the carriage. Their hands were tightly gripping the window. Even if their nails were bleeding, their fingers were numb, and their consciousness was getting worse. They did not dare to move. They were afraid that they would fall down. They did not know why they were still holding on. In this way, they could not directly cut the rope of the horse. Jingwan was still below. They did not know her exact position. If they let the horse fall, what if it hit her? Some people wanted to say that since it was confirmed that she fell on the bottom of the river, how could there be a chance of survival? But when she saw Madame Luo's tense face, she didn't dare to say it out loud. In the beginning, someone had only muttered a few words, but she had heard it from far away. She looked at the amiable old woman with a fierce gaze, as if she wanted to devour someone. And it was definitely not only Madame Luo who cared about Jingwan's safety. Even the most obedient cat would show its sharpest claws after this. Whoever dared to say another word would not have a good ending. Even if White Dragon Temple had already sent monks and Luo family servants down the mountain to find Jingwan, even if the others were rescued, Madame Luo still stood at the edge of the cliff and refused to leave. Gong Mama did her best to comfort old Madame Luo, telling her that Miss was blessed by the heavens and that nothing would happen to her. However, these words were useless and powerless at the moment. Nanny Gong was such a strict person that she would never criticize others in her heart. When she stood beside Madame Luo, she cursed Li Hongyuan fiercely in her heart. That bastard had always done whatever he wanted, without considering the feelings of others. At that moment, Nanny Gong even had the impulse to tell Jingwan everything, so that she could see his true colors. In the end, it was Great Master Liaochen who arrived late and personally assured old Madame Luo that third Miss Luo's life was not in danger. When others said that Jingwan had no chance of survival, old Madame Luo was so angry that her eyes turned red and she didn't believe them. But when Master Liaochen said this, she was still suspicious. In fact, she also faintly felt that her most beloved granddaughter was gone. After all, she was so tall. How much good fortune did she have to be to let her escape death? Because of this, she suspected Master Liaochen as well. Ba, Master Liaochen said, there are no signs in old Madame's life that the white-haired person will have to send off the black-haired person. Therefore, old Madame, you can rest assured. This was a blessing in disguise for old Madame Luo. Master Liaochen had 3 divinations every year, but in fact, he had already divined 2 out of the 3. Somehow, he felt that the 3rd destined person was about to appear. However, in order to comfort old Madame Luo, he was not stingy. Therefore, when Master Liaochen said that there was a destined person, it was not certain. He was always merciful, not inflexible at all. Old Madame Luo was startled. Only then did she remember Master Liaochen's reputation. For decades, his predictions had never been wrong. She finally showed a look of surprise. Thank you, Master Liaochen. Thank you, Master Liaochen. Other than anything else, she would definitely add a large sum of money to the White Dragon Temple. Hearing this, the others breathed a sigh of relief. As for whether her injuries would be serious, when people were in desperate straits, a little bit of comfort was enough. At this time, their thoughts were almost the same as Jingwan's. As long as she was alive, there was hope. If something really happened, the Luo family would be able to support her for the rest of her life. Fu Yunting was the only one who didn't even have a scratch on his skin after falling off the cliff. He had helped save people before, and now he finally relaxed his clenched fists. He also felt a little less guilty. In fact, he had been blaming himself. If it wasn't for him, perhaps the Luo family's third daughter wouldn't have. The most regretful and distressed person was Sun Yilin. The situation of the woman he had fallen in love with was unknown, and his younger sister was seriously injured and unconscious. Most importantly, her face was injured. Such a deep and long cut, from the bottom of her earlobe to the corner of her mouth. If it was a little deeper and a little longer, it would have directly torn open the corner of her mouth. How terrible would that be? No matter how good the medicine was, it would be impossible for her to recover to her original state. Even if he just hoped that her face could be smoother, it would be very difficult. His younger sister could be considered as completely disfigured. He didn't need to say how important a woman's face was, especially in a family like theirs. His younger sister's marriage hadn't been decided yet. Without that face, there would be no value in a marriage alliance. It was conceivable that his father would not hesitate to give up his younger sister and support the concubine's younger sister. A woman who fell from the clouds into the mud would only receive more ridicule, humiliation, and trampling. Not to mention his concubine's younger sisters, who had always been at odds with his younger sister and were jealous of her. If they were allowed to gain power, his younger sister's fate was unimaginable. Jingwan being able to survive was naturally a blessing in disguise. However, this matter was far from over. Sun Yijia was the only legitimate daughter of Duke Ding, and Ruan Fangfei was the youngest legitimate daughter of the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet. Both of them were unmarried, and their value was far greater than their own. Because of Sun Yijia's disfigurement, she suddenly turned from a treasure to a broken piece of debris. Not to mention what would happen to Ruan Ruizhong. Duke Ding was bound to ask for an explanation. The so-called explanation, to put it bluntly, was to ask for benefits. Among the people involved in this matter, the one who could benefit the most from it was Ruan Ruizhong and Master Liaochen. The former was not easy to deal with, and his daughter had also been harmed. In addition, the cause of the accident was not Ruan Fangfei, so it would be difficult to extract benefits from him. The latter, on the other hand, was more valuable. If he could exchange Master Liaochen for a chance to defy the heavens and change his fate, Duke Ding wouldn't feel bad even if he lost all of his daughters, let alone one. Everyone knew what kind of person Master Liaochen was. Logically speaking, when such a big thing happened, he should have been the first to appear. If he came late, it could only mean that he had other important matters to attend to. The monks of White Dragon Temple wouldn't delay the rescue because of this, so naturally, no one could blame him. As for the beast that caused the trouble, they couldn't pin the crime of lax discipline on him just because he was in White Dragon Temple's territory. No one knew that an even more serious matter had happened on this mountain. Madame Luo and the others were anxiously waiting for Jingwan's return. As soon as the incident happened, each family had sent the news back to the capital as quickly as possible. The first person to know about everything here was naturally Li Hongyuan's father, Lu Chengdi. It could be imagined how angry he was when he learned about this matter. His son had been chased away by him for less than a day, and something had happened to him. He was besieged, fell off a cliff, fell into a river, and his life and death was unknown. So much so that he neglected the matter of Jingwan and the others falling off the cliff. At that time, Lu Chengdi had already finished dealing with political affairs and was drinking wine and enjoying the dance in the inner palace with beauties in his arms. When he heard the news, he smashed everything in front of him, and the beauties around him were also chased out. Therefore, in less than a quarter of an hour, the entire inner palace knew about the assassination of Jin Qinhuang. Once the inner palace knew, the court naturally also knew about it very quickly. The matter of the flower market hadn't been cleared up yet, and here there was an even more serious disaster. Moreover, Jin Qinhuang had just arrived at Bai Long Temple and was assassinated. It was hard not to link these two matters together. Thinking about the reason why Jin Qinhuang was punished, was it also a part of it? Was it someone who deliberately schemed against him? If this was really planned by someone early on, there would always be an illusion that there was an invisible big hand controlling the overall situation. It seemed that something really bad was going to happen, and the most prominent princes were all guessing who was the one who did it this time, and what was the reason for it. Although they all hated Li Hongyuan to death and almost every day cursed him to go to the 18 layers of hell, Li Hongyuan didn't have any conflict of interest with them. No matter how hateful he was, they couldn't deal with him. With Fu Huang's protection, if they made a move against him, wouldn't that be courting death? They were just waiting for him to make a mistake and then be tidied up by Fu Huang. Otherwise, they would just keep waiting until they were on the throne to tidy him up. This was something that everyone knew, but someone actually did it. Then the purpose was very obvious: to shift the blame. The several princes couldn't help but tense up. This matter wasn't done by them, so the person who did this wanted to deal with them. Wouldn't it be them? If the other party wanted to shift the blame onto them, then it was necessary to create evidence that was unfavorable to them. If there were no loopholes around them, then the so-called shift wouldn't succeed. But with this kind of deliberate planning, could it be that they were confident? As soon as they thought that there must be a problem with one of the links in their hands that they didn't know about, fear and anger intertwined. Investigate, they must investigate clearly. At the same time, Bai Long Temple also had to send people to investigate. Although they knew that it was a foolish act to act at this time, there was no news coming back from there. If they couldn't grasp some accurate information, they would be very passive. This wasn't like the flower market, where they could just give up and clean up the mess. If they didn't do anything and waited for the pot of shit to fall on their heads, then this battle for the throne could be withdrawn in advance. As his mother, Imperial concubine Su rushed to Lu Chengdi's place in an attempt to get more information. Imperial concubine Su didn't wail and didn't even shed a tear. But her forbearance, restlessness, and panic were all seen by Lu Chengdi. My dear concubine, don't worry. It's said that scourges live for 1,000 years. That evil creature is the scourge of scourges. It won't be so easy for something to happen to him. Your Majesty, how can you talk about your own son like that? Imperial concubine Su glared at him. Okay. I said something wrong. That's my son, the son of the dragon. Naturally, he will be protected by the heavens. Naturally, he will turn misfortune into good fortune and misfortune into good fortune. Imperial concubine Su softly hummed and wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief. Although Yuan has a bad temper, he is the most filial. When he heard that this concubine missed the vegetarian food in Bai Long Temple, he sent someone to quickly send it back at noon. He has always been spoiled. Although this concubine didn't say it, I was afraid that he would suffer. But... Imperial concubine Su's voice was a little choked. It's all this concubine's fault. If I didn't send Yuan to Bai Long Temple, perhaps this wouldn't have happened. Why couldn't I pray for blessings? Why did I have to send him to Bai Long Temple? If elder sister were to find out, she would definitely blame me. Perhaps it was because she was too emotional, but Imperial consort Su spoke without thinking. Lu Chengdi's expression changed. No, Yuan will be fine. If something happens to him, this concubine will definitely make the person behind the scenes regret walking in this world. Imperial concubine Su felt his coldness and killing intent and couldn't help but feel a little frightened. She knew very well that Lu Chengdi might not have thought of passing the throne to Yuan, but Yuan-er's position in his heart was definitely the most special among all the princes. He was so special that he was irreplaceable. He was so special that he would give up his favorite prince because of him. Lu Chengdi's reaction was a little slower, but he also had some connections that the ministers could think of. It was also at this time that Lu Chengdi's personal attendant returned. Your Majesty, this servant has asked. Imperial concubine Su looked at Lu Chengdi with some confusion. In fact, she was also asking him if she should leave. Lu Chengdi looked at her comfortingly. Speak. Chinggungyi said that before she entered the palace, she was already not a virgin. That Mama Gong who examined her body had connections with her maiden family and helped her hide it. She didn't want this matter to be known by someone and secretly threatened her. A few days ago, she even told her that because she entered the palace and was favored, her maiden family became arrogant and domineering. They accepted bribes, forcibly occupied fertile land, and killed people. Each and every crime is unforgivable. If Chinggungyi doesn't listen, she will bring the matter of her maiden family to His Majesty. Last night, she received a message from that side, telling her to seduce Jin Qinhuang. After the matter is completed, not only will they help her keep the secret, but they will also prove her innocence in front of His Majesty. They will also help her clean up the matter of her maiden family and ignore any future troubles. That personal attendant lowered his head and answered truthfully, not daring to hide anything. Imperial concubine Su was very surprised. Perhaps she thought that Lu Chengdi was right next to her and was afraid of hurting his face. She hurriedly covered her mouth with a handkerchief to hide her expression. Beloved concubine doesn't need to cover it up. Jin is also very surprised. Lu Chengdi said indifferently. Relatively speaking, Lu Chengdi's temper was relatively good. These past few years, when he lost his temper, 7 out of 10 times, it was because of Li Hongyuan. Almost every time, he would fly into a rage. But when he was truly furious, he was actually very calm. Every time he was like this, it meant that the consequences of the matter would be very serious. The angriest and calmest time was when he strangled her to death with his own hands. Even for someone like Imperial concubine Su, at this time, her heart was beating faster and faster. The so-called thunder and rain were the grace of the monarch. This sentence was not false at all. No matter how many tricks you used, no matter how much honor and favor you were, one sentence from him could make you lose everything. When you couldn't hold him in the palm of your hand, you were destined to be controlled by him. Don't blame Imperial concubine Su for being the most favored in the harem for more than 20 years and still being afraid of him. Also, don't blame so many people for wanting his throne. Take all the palace servants around Chang'e into custody. Gather all the palace concubines and palace servants in the harem to watch them being interrogated. Those who don't speak will be beaten to death. Beloved concubine, go take a look too. He gently patted Imperial concubine Su's shoulder. Imperial concubine Su's hands and feet were ice cold. Her hands and feet were stiff like a puppet as she bowed and left. Those who don't speak will be beaten to death. Let's not talk about whether Chang'e's palace maids knew about her, and whether they were the ones who helped the mastermind to threaten Chang'e. If they couldn't say anything, they would die. If they didn't know and said something, they would still die. If they really were a spy, they would still die. This meant that all the palace servants who previously served Chang'e will be beaten to death. Lu Chengdi was killing the chicken to warn the monkey. He was using this method to tell everyone in the harem that he was the true master of the harem. If they wanted to cause trouble under his watch, they had to be prepared to be severely punished. Chang'e was not a virgin before entering the palace. As the monarch, he was deceived. In addition, she seduced his son. As the saying goes, deceiving the monarch first and intending to wear a green hat later, Lu Chengdi had eyes but failed to see and pampered her for several months. It could be said that this made him lose all face. This kind of thing should have been tightly covered up, but Lu Chengdi did the opposite. It could be said that he was announcing it to the harem. With such an open cover, how many courtiers would not know? An emperor who didn't even care about his own face, then what exactly did he want to do? It was terrifying to think about. Perhaps because he had vented some of his anger, Lu Chengdi's mood calmed down a lot. He firmly believed that his evil son would not die so easily. Finally, he seemed to remember that there seemed to be another matter. He took the letter again and read it carefully. The letter was concise and to the point. It only explained the cause of the incident and the people who fell off the cliff. The situation of those people was still unknown. It seemed that the next letter would be after the result of the incident. Lu Chengdi frowned. He was not sure whether the two things were related. After all, it was a sudden accident on the other side. His son was assassinated here. He had reason to suspect that the killers deliberately created chaos to lure the monks of White Dragon Temple away. Without the help of the monks of White Dragon Temple, it would be easier to assassinate his son. If this was really the case, then the whole thing would become more complicated and troublesome. If it was just a coincidence, then it wouldn't be much less troublesome. Some people might try to link the two things together. After all, it was easier to fish in muddy water. In this way, Lu Chengdi had to consider the worst case. None of the old foxes in the imperial court were easy to deal with. Lu Chengdi had a headache. These bastards couldn't stop. He secretly made up his mind that he would punish the mastermind severely once he caught him. After thinking about it, he still couldn't come up with a good result. Therefore, without saying anything, he summoned all the elders of the people involved in the letter to the palace. It seemed that they had already known about it. Of course, the elders of Fu Yunting were excluded. Only he, who was paralyzed in bed, was not dead, probably because of his nephew's marriage. He was not dead, but just like a living dead. Lu Chengdi directly threw the trouble to them. He said very straightforwardly, "What do you want? Tell me. I will try my best to satisfy you. If your request is too excessive, get out of my way. Anyway, it has nothing to do with me." Although he said it euphemistically, Lu Chengdi clearly meant this. Yuan Xiaoqiao and Zhou Shuang's father were a little flattered and didn't know what to say for a while. Perhaps because his father-in-law, Luo Peishan, was here, Yuan Xiaoqiao's father wanted to follow his lead. However, Luo Peishan had his back to him. It was not convenient for him to speak, so he could only keep silent. Although Yuan Ruizhong looked calm, there was unspeakable worry in his eyes. He took the initiative to say, "Your Majesty, no matter what happens to my daughter, it is her own fate. This matter has nothing to do with your Majesty. It is my honor to receive your Majesty's favor. It is my daughter's honor. I dare not ask for anything more from your Majesty." That was why people said that the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet was extraordinary. Hearing these words, Lu Chengdi felt that it was ironic. Compared with Lu Chengdi, Duke Ding was not very happy. He cursed twice fiercely. "You know how to pretend to be a good person. Your Majesty, the specific situation is still unknown. It is better to wait until it is clear." He didn't care about Sunny Jia's safety, but he didn't know the specific situation. It was not good for him to speak. If she died, naturally, he could get the most benefits. She was his favorite, not his treasure. If she was seriously injured, it would be best if the emperor could solve her future for her. If she was lucky and only suffered minor injuries, then it would be best to make it as serious as possible. In short, the abacus in his heart was crackling. "Iching Luo, what do you think?" Lu Chengdi saw that Luo Peishan was silent, so he asked, "Your Majesty, this subject believes that this subject's granddaughter will be safe and sound. Therefore, this subject has no request." Lu Chengdi looked at him and was quite surprised. Luo Peishan usually didn't speak like this. However, looking at his appearance, he really didn't mean what he said. However, didn't this mean that he really valued his family's younger generation? Only if he truly cared would he wholeheartedly hope for her safety and not ask for anything else. "Okay, I got it." As for the other two people, Lu Chengdi was too lazy to pay attention to them. They were purely going through the motions. At worst, they would be rewarded after the event. This was already the most benevolent thing they could do. If it were any other time, Lu Chengdi wouldn't care even if a few more people in his family died. After the people were rescued, the families naturally sent letters to him. Lu Chengdi was the only one who had not received any news from his evil spawn. The waiting process was always worrying. The longer it went on, the more impatient he became. The servants who served him were punished one after another because of some trivial things that no one would care about. At first, it was only 10 strokes of the cane. Then, it increased to 20, 50, and finally, they did nothing. Even if they just knelt on one side, he would vent his anger on them and beat them to death directly. Even the closest ones were not unscathed. Tomorrow, at least half of the servants in his palace would be replaced. Naturally, the imperial concubines were paying attention to Lu Chengdi's situation. They kept quiet out of fear and couldn't help but hope that Li Hongyuan was fine. No matter how much he was hated, as long as he was not provoked, he would not stir up trouble in his father's harem. However, Lu Chengdi's anger was different. If something went wrong, they would be implicated. If Lu Chengdi, who didn't sleep all night, knew that his son's life was not in danger and he was sleeping in a tender place all night, would he be so angry that he would vomit blood and die? Chapter 75. Old Madam, third young lady is back. Third young lady is back. Old Madam Luo's maid was so happy that she didn't even care about etiquette and hurried to the guest room where Old Madam Luo was staying. Her voice could be heard from far away. If it was in the past, the mothers would have reprimanded her, but now the situation was different. Not only did they not reprimand her, they were so happy that they all went to report the good news to Old Madam Luo. It had been nearly 20 hours since the accident. Even if Old Madam Luo knew that Jingwan was still safe, she didn't see her and didn't know how her injury was. She couldn't stop worrying. She almost didn't sleep all night and didn't eat anything. She was already old. How could she withstand such torment? Everyone was worried that she would fall ill, but it was useless no matter how they tried to persuade her. Because if they tried to persuade her, old Madame Luo would look at them coldly. She was not your child. Of course you don't care about her. What's more, you don't want to see a group of heartless people around me. It was indeed difficult to understand that kind of anxiety and torment if one didn't experience it personally and didn't see something happen to one's loved ones. After old Madame Luo said such harsh words, no one dared to say a word. They just hoped that third young lady could come back soon. Luo Jinghua, on the other hand, stayed by old Madame Luo's side and didn't say anything comforting. He only said to old Madame Luo at the beginning, "If my sister is really not well, I will take care of her for the rest of my life. If I die before my sister, I will leave behind my last words and ask my children and grandchildren to treat their aunt and grandaunt like how they treat me. Otherwise, they will be expelled from the family." These words might sound like cursing Jingwan, but it was the most sincere and practical care. Old Madame Luo took his hand and almost burst into tears. Good, good, good. You are all good children, good children. This is fate. It may be in this life. It's rare to meet someone who is worth it. You have to cherish, cherish, cherish. The grandfather and grandson stopped talking about Jingwan, although they were waiting for her. Luo Jinghua told old Madame Luo some interesting things in the capital and talked about the various friends he made. He tried to distract old Madame Luo as much as possible, so that the grandfather and grandson, who were not very close, were quite close in this short period of time. Even when she couldn't take it anymore and closed her eyes to take a nap, Luo Jinghua never left. Finally, she came back. Old Madame Luo suddenly, she seemed to wake up. Wanwan is back? Yes, grandmother. Little sister is back. Luo Jinghua was also very happy. He quickly helped her up with the servant girls. Madame Luo had not changed her clothes to begin with, so she stopped the maid from combing her hair and hurriedly walked out. But Jingwan. She was worried. Jingwan. How could Jingwan Luo worry, not worry to worry? She, miss, she. Luo, she. Luo, Mississippi. After waiting for the people who went to find her, she immediately went back without saying anything. Before that, she had already treated the wound on her neck. Some things with traces of Li Hongyuan were also wiped clean. On the way back, the others were worried that she couldn't bear the long journey. After all, the road was full of potholes. Before walking from the foot of the mountain to White Dragon Temple, it was basically impossible to step on a flat ground. More importantly, the journey was very long. Unexpectedly, Jingwan didn't slow them down at all. On the contrary, the servants of the Luo family didn't rest for a while and continued on the road. They were very tired. Their speed was even slower than that of the 70 or 80 old people. If they walked slowly like this, they didn't know when they could return to White Dragon Temple. Jingwan decided to go first with the two monks. To some extent, this decision was very risky. The monks from White Dragon Temple were young, not old. They were all young and strong. Of course, if they could come to find Jingwan together, there was absolutely no problem with their character. They were all devoted to Buddha and abided by the rules and precepts. But the people of the Luo family didn't know. How could they be assured to let their miss follow these two foreign men? Even if nothing happened, if they were seen by others, their miss's reputation would definitely be affected. But Jingwan couldn't continue to wait. Once emotions took the upper hand, it was difficult to suppress them with reason. She was willing to believe in the people of White Dragon Temple and gamble. From the beginning to the end, the two monks were neither sad nor happy. They knew that the servants of the Luo family didn't trust them, so they didn't explain or promise anything. After Jingwan made the decision, they dutifully escorted Jingwan back to White Dragon Temple. To Jingwan's surprise, she didn't meet anyone along the way. At first, she thought it was because it was remote. Later, she gradually found that something was wrong. It was daytime, and the foot of the mountain in front of White Dragon Temple was very lively. It turned out that the two monks quietly avoided other people and protected Jingwan in their own way, putting an end to the worries of the servants of the Luo family. Thank you very much, masters. Benefactress, you are too polite, one of them said. This was the first time that Jingwan heard them speak since she saw them. Entering the guest room in the backyard of White Dragon Temple, Jingwan saw Nurse Gong and others waiting there from a distance. She felt as if she had been separated from them for a lifetime. Seeing that Jingwan could move freely and didn't seem to be seriously injured, she was really surprised. Although Nurse Gong had known it, she still showed her joy at the right time, saying that it was God's blessing. However, Jingwan felt that Nanny Gong's gaze was constantly on the handkerchief wrapped around her neck. Originally, Jingwan didn't pay much attention to the bite mark, but under Nanny Gong's gaze, she felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. "Don't worry, Nurse Gong. It was scratched when I fell down. It will be fine after some rest." How could Nurse Gong not know whether she had such a wound on her neck or not? She didn't need to think to know what was going on. "Miss, you have suffered. I will take a look at you later. I think the wound is not deep. If you take good care of it, it won't leave a scar." Okay. Although she said that, she felt more guilty in her heart. What was going on? "Miss, do you want to take a bath first, or go to see old madam first?" "I will go to see grandmother first." She clearly knew that it was not easy to survive a fall from such a high place, and that she was extremely lucky. If she still dressed neatly and beautifully, the first impression people would have upon seeing her would not be to admire her beauty, but to suspect that she was hiding something. She might as well let her grandmother see her current appearance and feel more at ease. As she walked inside, she asked about other people's conditions. After hearing about old Madame Luo's words and deeds, she felt guilty, but also touched and warmed. Needless to say, the servants had all been properly settled. Yuan Xiao broke her leg and injured her lungs. It was likely that she would suffer from chronic illness in the future. Zhouing Shuang injured her head and accumulated a large blood clot. Master Liaochen personally examined it and said that she might lose her sight. There were several other injuries on her body, all of which were different degrees of bone damage. However, compared to her injuries, they weren't that serious. Jingwan's lips moved, but she didn't know what to say. What about Sister Jia? Miss Sun's injuries were the least serious. Jingwan sighed in relief. It wasn't bad news. Gong Mama sighed inwardly. She's also the most serious. Jingwan's anger was stifled before she could finish speaking. Her heart ached as she hurriedly asked, "What happened?" Miss Sun's face was injured from here to here. Gong Mama gestured to her own face, and it's very deep. It'll be difficult to smooth it out. Jingwan was stunned. She felt as if she had been struck by lightning. If it had been her own face, she would not have cared. However, it was different for these local girls. Their faces could be said to be more important than their lives. Wasn't it the most serious injury? Disfiguring her face was equivalent to losing half of her life. If she couldn't bear it, she might even commit suicide. Wan. Old Madame Luo's voice brought Jingwan back to her senses. She saw that old Madame Luo seemed to have aged a lot in one night. Her face was haggard, and her hair was slightly messy. It was one thing to hear from Gong Mama, and another to see it with her own eyes. For a moment, her heart ached and she quickly walked forward. "Grandmother." Old Madame Luo didn't dare to hug her because she was worried about her injuries. "Quickly tell grandmother. Where are you injured? Why didn't you just lie down? Instead, you forced yourself to come and see grandmother?" "Grandmother, they're all superficial injuries. They didn't hurt my bones or my lungs. Don't worry, I'm really fine." "How can you be fine after falling from such a height? Your clothes are already soaked. How dare you say you're fine?" "Jingbua, quickly go and ask Master Liaochen to take a good look at your sister." Old Madame Luo scolded, while carefully touching Jingwan's neck. It was difficult to forget how it was injured after being noticed again and again. Jingwan resisted the urge to retreat. "I'll go right now." Luo Jingbua somewhat believed his sister's words. After all, it had been a long time since she fell off the cliff. If her injuries were really serious, she wouldn't have this kind of energy. Although she looked haggard, it was more like she didn't rest well. Of course, he also noticed the slightly strange expression on Jingwan's face. A large group of people surrounded Jingwan. Jingwan naturally couldn't bring up going out to see other people, especially Sister Jia. Perhaps she also didn't want to see people. Master Liaochen probably had nothing to do at the moment. When Luo Jingbua went to invite him, he quickly came over. Master Liaochen never thought that he would see Jin Qinhuang's obsession in this kind of situation. He also confirmed that she was indeed his third fated person this year. Although he couldn't read her fortune anymore, it didn't hinder anything. After seeing Jingwan's face, he didn't show it on his face, but his heart was rather moved. She and Jin Qinhuang were both outliers. Although he couldn't see the specifics clearly, he could roughly guess one or two things. These two people should be together. After all, if they couldn't be together with each other in this lifetime, it wouldn't just be the two of them who changed their fates. Not to mention other things, Jingwan's original fate should have been peaceful and smooth for the first 10 years. After marriage, there would be a major turning point. Her fate would be bumpy and full of twists and turns. Even if her heart was firm and unyielding in the end, she still couldn't escape the fate of death. Now that the difficult fate had been cut off, gradually showing signs of happiness, longevity, and good health. But it was still hazy, which meant that there might be some twists and turns. Because Jin Qinhuang forcibly changed her fate, naturally everything was going to be uncertain. Master Liaochen had always believed in letting nature take its course. Everything was decided by the heavens. However, there would always be some people that people couldn't bear. Jingwan's eyes were clear and gentle. Her heart was open and kind. This kind of person shouldn't suffer so much. Jin Qinhuang insisted on changing her fate. Other than his obsession with her, wasn't it also because he owed her a debt? The grace of saving his life in the previous life, the grace of rebirth that changed his fate. Wasn't this also destined? Jingwan had a good impression of Master Liaochen. This was a true senior monk, true to his name. His words were as one, his countenance benevolent. Greetings to Master. Ba. Master Liaochen smiled. Miss Luo doesn't need to be so courteous. Jingwan lightly raised her eyebrows and smiled. Why doesn't Master call me Nu Shizhu? Does everyone else in Bai Long Temple call me that? Since there are still so many people who call me that, it doesn't matter if there's one less. Not inflexible, not pedantic, not damaging his temperament as a monk, but at the same time, it made people feel that he was their elder. That's true. My daughter will have to trouble Master here. It's not considered trouble. Miss originally had an accident at Bai Long Temple, so it's considered this poor monk's fault. Who can accurately predict something like a natural disaster? Master doesn't have to take the responsibility on himself. Jingwan's tone was light. It wasn't that she tacitly agreed with Master Liaochen's words, but that she thought of Sun Yijia and the others. They didn't do anything outrageous, but they ended up like this. Heaven really was unfair. Master Liaochen helped Jingwan take her pulse as he said, Severn's misfortune may be a blessing in disguise. Jingwan stared blankly. She wasn't sure if Master Liaochen saw through her thoughts and specially comforted her, but she had heard a lot about Master Liaochen's reputation on the way here. Master is right. My daughter thought wrongly. Master Liaochen nodded. Miss Luo's body is fine. Just apply some medicine for bruises and it'll be fine. There's no need to drink medicine. Many thanks, Master. Grandmother will be relieved to hear your words. Jingwan had wanted to ask about Li Hongyuan. Master Liaochen probably knew about the assassination attempt, but she swallowed the words back down. It wasn't because Mama Gong and the servant girls were present, but it wasn't something she could ask about. Miss Luo, don't worry. Everything is fine. As long as Miss Luo stays true to herself, everything will be resolved. It was true that Master Liaochen left a good impression, but why didn't she understand what he was saying? On the surface, it seemed very simple, but why did she feel like there was more to it? More importantly, Master Liaochen seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. He could give her plausible answers no matter what she was thinking. Meeting Jingwan's puzzled gaze, Master Liaochen smiled but didn't say anything. Miss Luo, you still need to rest. This poor monk will leave first. Jingwan hurriedly got up to see him out. Madame Luo and the others were worried that too many people would disturb Master Liaochen, so they waited outside. When they came out, Madame Luo hurriedly got up to ask about it. Even though Jingwan had already explained that she had been lucky and had fallen in a special place, she had managed to survive. After confirming that Jingwan was really all right, Madame Luo couldn't help but say, "It's really Buddha's blessing." This situation was so similar to what had happened 2 days ago that everyone couldn't help but wonder if Jingwan had offended someone, which was why she had been in trouble for the past 2 days. If you ask me, Miss Luo has always been kind. You're in a sacred place of Buddhism, so Buddha naturally has to protect you, a servant girl said. However, she might be able to gain favor at other times, but now was not the right time. After all, so many people had been injured, especially Sun Yijia. Didn't this mean that she was usually a vicious person? Otherwise, why would Buddha give her such a cruel punishment of disfigurement? More than one person looked at her coldly. The servant girl seemed to have realized what had happened, and her face instantly paled. That cliff was so steep. It's naturally Buddha's blessing that no one died, Jingwan said. Master Liaochen was still the same. He didn't say much and even smiled amiably. Luo Jinghua saw him off again. Although Madame Luo was exhausted, she still urged Jingwan to rest first. If grandmother doesn't rest first, how can your granddaughter rest in peace? Madame Luo couldn't dissuade Jingwan, but now she did feel relieved and relaxed. She felt tired, so she agreed. However, she didn't forget to remind the people around her to visit Yuan Xiaoqiao often. Although she didn't have any feelings for her, she was still her granddaughter. Jingwan washed up in the wing room next door. 2 days ago, she was attacked by Li Hongyuan at night, so the marks on her back were naturally seen by the servant girls. However, Nanny Gong easily fooled the servant girls who didn't know what had happened. They mistook the kiss marks on Jingwan's back, which had faded a lot, as scratches caused by falling down the cliff. Fortunately, Li Hongyuan's marks were all over the place. Otherwise, it would be hard to explain. Even if there were scratches, they wouldn't be little red marks. From this point of view, it seemed that she had to thank Li Hongyuan. Nanny Gong's face darkened. The servant girls naturally thought that she was worried about Jingwan's injury. Is the injury on her back serious? I don't feel anything. Nanny Gong was worried that if she continued to talk, Jingwan would have doubts, so she changed the topic. The wound on Jingwan's neck was carefully treated by Nanny Gong. However, in the process, Jingwan always felt that Nanny Gong's gaze was going to pierce through her neck. She felt a little scared for no reason. Well, Nanny, even if there will be a scar, it's nothing to care about. Could Nanny Gong tell her that what she cared about was not whether there would be a scar, but the way the scar was left? She was easy to fool. Indeed, there's nothing to care about. Although the King of Hell was a bastard, he definitely wouldn't despise the girl just because she had a scar on her body. Moreover, this scar was caused by him. If he dared to have any thoughts about it in the future, Granny Gong might really fight him to the death. You're generous. Jingwan couldn't help but look at Nanny Gong. Why did the latter words sound so stiff? It looked no different from usual, but it felt weird. Nanny. Miss, which of the 3 girls do you want to visit first? Nanny Gong knew her well. She couldn't sleep peacefully if she didn't check on them. Nanny, you changed the topic too abruptly. Ying Shuang is still asleep, so I won't disturb her for the time being. I'll visit my cousin first, and then Sister Jia. In fact, she still didn't know how to face Sun Yijia. When Jingwan went out, she happened to meet the wife of Wu Wanho's heir apparent. She was a newlywed and originally came to offer incense, but she didn't expect to encounter such an incident. Fortunately, Fu Yunting was fine. If a new widow came, then it would be the wife of Wu Wanho's heir apparent's family name was Wei. It didn't seem obvious now, but it was said that her ancestors were very prominent. Madame Wei was kind-hearted and had a straightforward personality. She had known Fu Yunting for a long time and could be said to be congenial. In the days after their marriage, they could be said to be in a good mood. She didn't expect to encounter such an incident. Although her husband wasn't injured, her bad mood naturally wouldn't come back easily. When she saw that Jingwan was standing, she was really relieved. Her husband felt guilty and uneasy because of a strange woman. Even if he knew what happened, he still cared a little. Now, he should let go of the knot in his heart. On the contrary, it was the Luo family that owed him. Don't blame her for being snobbish or calculating. It was just that Wu Wanho's situation was very bad now. As long as she could do something that would benefit Wu Wanho's heir apparent, she didn't mind losing face. She was a woman, so it was more convenient for her to do certain things than a man. At this time, when she saw Jingwan, The smile on her face was especially sincere. It's great that third Miss Luo is fine. I have to thank Heir Apparent Fu for being able to be safe and sound. Jingwan first bowed to Madame Wei. It was a formal bow. This time, Madame Wei was a little embarrassed. She was only 3 years older than Jingwan. Although 17 years old was a little late for marriage, because she was an old lady, it was one of the reasons why she was able to marry Fu Yunting. The officials of the Wei family were also military officials, so they didn't pay much attention to etiquette. However, they knew that Jingwan's bow was too formal. Although she was the wife of the heir apparent of Wu Anho's heir apparent, in fact, there weren't many people who would take her seriously. They might even mock and ridicule her. She wasn't sure if this Miss Luo was too good at being a person, or if she was sincere and not pretentious. You can't. Get up quickly. Both parties exchanged some pleasantries. Although there was nothing substantial, when Madame Wei left, both parties seemed to be quite happy. With the situation in Wu Anho's heir apparent, I don't know what will happen to the wife of the heir apparent in the future. Jingwan was quite emotional. Wu Anho's heir apparent may not be without any changes. It depends on whether Wu Anho's heir apparent could survive until Emperor Liu Cheng's death. It depends on the attitude of the next emperor towards Wu Anho's heir apparent. Jingwan understood Nurse Gong's unfinished words. In fact, what Nurse Gong wanted to say was, it depends on what the King of Hell thinks. Yuan Xiaoqiao's temporary guest room was just next door, separated by a wall. However, Yuan Xiaoqiao just happened to drink the medicine and fell asleep. Jingwan just looked at her pale, sleeping face. Perhaps she hadn't recovered from the shock yet. Even though she had taken the sedative, she still couldn't sleep very well. She coughed from time to time. A lively and active girl who had a clear distinction between love and hate was lying here like this. She might be weak and sickly in the future. Take good care of her. If she needs anything, don't hesitate to find me over there. When she wakes up, send someone to inform me.
Yes.
The person who waited on Yuan Xiaoqiao responded. Zhouing Shuang also stayed here. Jingwan naturally went to take a look. She asked some simple questions and then went to Sun Yijia's place. Ding General Manor also had a fixed residence in White Dragon Temple. When the people of Ding General Manor came, they basically stayed there. It was some distance away from the Luo residence. Chapter 76. Sun Yijia's attention was on the flowers and trees in the courtyard, while everyone else's attention was on her. Naturally, they did not notice Jingwan's arrival. Jingwan stepped on a small branch beside her foot. Although the sound was soft, because the courtyard was quiet enough, almost everyone heard it and subconsciously turned their heads. Sun Yijia's dull eyes lit up. She opened her mouth to call out to her, but just as she opened her mouth, she subconsciously covered her face and let out a soft hiss. Her beautiful brows furrowed, and she pursed her lips. Obviously, because she suddenly opened her mouth, she had pulled on her wound. But other than that, she did not have any other emotions and waved at Jingwan. The moment Sun Yilin saw Jingwan, his gloomy eyes finally lit up. It seemed that other than some minor injuries, she was actually considered to be unharmed. He was happy from the bottom of his heart. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Jingwan squat down as a greeting and then walked into the room. Sun Yilin looked at his sister again. Indeed, she was standing up and walking back into the room. Miss Luo. Sun Yilin called out to her. Jingwan stopped in her tracks and looked at him. Is something the matter, young master Sun? Although Yijia and you have only known each other for a short period of time, in fact, I have never seen her so close to any other girl. Even if it was her own sister, to her, it was only on the surface. In reality, she was like a complete stranger. She is like a real sister to you. Now that she has met with such a disaster, in the future, I hope that Miss Luo can console her. Sister Yijia treats me with sincerity, so I will naturally treat her with sincerity. You want the best for her, and I am no exception. Thus, there is no need for young master to say anything more. I will do my best. Sun Yilin nodded and did not say anything else. Jingwan walked straight into the room. Sun Yijia sat by the table and gestured for her to sit. Jingwan didn't care about etiquette or rules. She didn't even try to avoid it. She just looked straight at her face. For people who didn't know her well, this was indeed very rude. However, if people who were close to her blindly avoided it, that kind of subtle and deliberate indifference would be even more uncomfortable. Half of her face was covered by a white cloth, and a thin white thread wrapped around the top of her head and chin. The white thread was handled very carefully, and it covered up as much as possible. This was also the reason why Jingwan didn't see any obvious marks on the other side. Sunny-Jia reached out and pulled her to sit down. She then waved her hand at the people serving her, indicating for them to leave. Jingwan understood that she wanted to talk to him alone, so he asked his men to leave. After all, Sunny-Jia's wet nurse was still worried. Before she left, she couldn't help but say a few words. It's not suitable for Miss Luo to speak for the time being. So, Miss Luo, Sunny-Jia reached out to stop her. It was obvious that she didn't want to listen to the nagging of the people around her. From the moment she was rescued, there had been chaos around her. First, they cried helplessly. Then, they felt sorry for her and cursed the heavens and the earth. They repeatedly said what she should do in the future. Seeing that she was expressionless, they began to persuade her. They talked about her identity and how she was doted on at home. Not only Duchess Ding, but also the old madam and the empress also liked her the most. Even if her face was hurt and disfigured, she would definitely have a good marriage. In the future, her husband's family would definitely not dare to treat her badly. Sunny-Jia wasn't stupid. How could she not know what it meant to be disfigured? So what if they talked about it? Some things were already destined when the sharp stone cut her face. She didn't respond. Everyone thought that she was disheartened and depressed. In fact, that wasn't the case. Her tolerance wasn't that bad. On the contrary, her heart was almost strangely calm. She actually wanted to tell them that she was fine, but she knew that no one would believe her, including her fifth brother. Thus, she chose to remain silent. This kind of silence made the people around her feel more and more sorry for her. They even sympathized with her, forming a vicious cycle. In the end, under her cold gaze, everyone finally shut their mouths. However, everyone's silence was equally unbearable. Jingwan's arrival was her savior. Sister Jia, are you okay? Jingwan believed that she was good at judging people when she made a mistake. She always felt that Sunny-Jia didn't seem to care about her disfigurement. Perhaps it was because she was too concerned, or perhaps it was a deep-rooted belief that a girl wouldn't care about her appearance. That was why the people around her were so nervous and careful. They didn't sense Sunny-Jia's true feelings at all. However, Jingwan wasn't very sure, so she asked directly. Sunny-Jia nodded without hesitation. Apart from the pain on her face and the bruises on her body, she was no different from usual. Jingwan heaved a sigh of relief. That's good. Sunny-Jia narrowed her eyes slightly and smiled. She took out the 4 treasures of the study from her room. After grinding them, she began to write. It's great that you're fine. I knew Sister Wan was different from others. You believed whatever I said and didn't think that I was pretending to be strong to comfort you. There's no need to lie about such things. If you really lost something you cared about, no matter if you threw a tantrum or stayed silent because you were sad, there's nothing to blame you for. You don't have to suffer and suppress yourself for the sake of accommodating others. Others should be tolerant and understanding of you. Sunny-Jia nodded and wrote again. As expected, Sister Wan knows me best. As she wrote, she sighed silently. It's been more than 10 years. Why can't I compare to the few times we met? It's probably the so-called bosom friend. Sunny-Jia was stunned. Yeah, isn't it, the so-called bosom friend? True bosom friends aren't the people closest to you. After seeing Sunny-Jia's state, Jingwan went straight to the point and went straight to the heart of the matter. Sister Jia, what are you going to do in the future? Sister Wan, when you harden your heart, you're really hurtful. The scar hasn't even formed a scab yet, but you're ruthlessly tearing it open again. You just have to face the cruelest reality. I just believe that Sister Jia isn't someone who would run away. Sunny-Jia looked at Jingwan's clear eyes that were filled with sincerity. She cared about her from the bottom of her heart. She cared only about her as a person, and not about the things that were attached to her. Sister Wan, do you know? My face shouldn't have been injured so badly. I did it on purpose. When I touched that sharp stone, I subconsciously tilted my head. I wasn't sure if I could avoid it if I tilted my head in the other direction, or if my face wouldn't be injured. At that time, my only thought was that if my face was gone, my value would also be gone. They wouldn't have to deliberately think about how to use me in exchange for the greatest benefits. Jingwan looked at the words on the paper. She reached out and rubbed it before throwing it into the incense burner. Sunny Jia took out another piece of paper. Sister Wan, aren't you being too cautious? Jingwan didn't say anything. Instead, she took the brush and wrote, Who am I doing this for? If someone else saw this and your parents heard about it, would you have a good life? I didn't expect Sister Wan's handwriting to be so good. Jingwan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Is this the time to talk about this? I already don't have a good life. How bad can it be? She knew very well how the people in her family would react. The only people who truly cared about her were probably only a few. Wu Gu, her grandmother, her wet nurse, or the two maids who grew up with her. Even her mother, for herself, for her children and grandchildren, would still give her up even if she was her only daughter. The only thing that was better than the others was that they probably wouldn't humiliate her. If they still had a little bit of kinship and a little bit of conscience, they might marry her to a man who was barely passable, instead of purely making use of trash and squeezing out the last bit of value she had. Is it worth it? Was it worth it to go to such an extent and fall into the dust just to escape the fate of being controlled by her family, or to fight for a bit of pride? What if I say it's worth it? Jingwan nodded. Then it's worth it. Sister Wan, you're so good. This kind of behavior clearly deserved a harsh reprimand. She was rebellious. She didn't know what was good for her. She didn't know how to appreciate her good fortune. Her fifth brother wouldn't approve of this behavior, but Jingwan, if she said it was worth it, she would stand on her side without hesitation. You have to finish the path you chose even if you have to kneel. It's good that you don't regret it. Sister Wan, are you worried that I can't endure hardship? Actually, the situation is far from the worst. Wu Gu will always protect me, and grandmother won't ignore me. There will be more people who will mock and ridicule me if I don't have enough food and clothes. There will be fewer people who will order me around, and there will be more unruly servants. That's all. However, I'm afraid that in order to protect me, he will be threatened into making compromises. After all, he's a close official of the emperor and has an advantage over others in many things. He's a man, and his talent isn't bad. Even if there are some troublesome matters, he can find a way to deal with it himself. Moreover, a man needs to know when to yield and when to stand tall. It's not a bad thing to use these things as training. When he can easily deal with the schemes of his family, why should he be afraid of those outside? Moreover, you're his biological sister. It's only right for him to protect you and do things for you. Since you're related by blood in this life, since your relationship is harmonious, you should cherish it and protect it. Sister Wan, what you mean is that I don't need to feel guilty if he makes compromises and forgives for me. On the contrary, I can order him around as much as I want. If he helps me, that's what he should do. If he doesn't, then he's incompetent, right? That's what you mean, right? Sunny Jia looked at her with sparkling eyes like a child's. She was a little excited as if she had discovered something incredible and was waiting for her approval. In the words of her previous life, she was asking for praise. Jingwan felt helpless again. The more she interacted with Sunny Jia, the more she felt that she was seriously inconsistent with the rumors. She looked arrogant on the outside but was actually very rebellious on the inside. She was also a little naughty. In the past, perhaps she had been hiding it so well that even she didn't realize it. Jingwan wasn't sure if she had revealed this side of her. If she had, then she had really sinned. She knew that Sunny Jia was deliberately misinterpreting her words. Looking at her little expression and the wound on her face, she looked pitiful. Jingwan braced herself and nodded. You can understand it that way. Seeing her squinting her eyes like a little fox, Jingwan silently mourned for Sun Yilin in her heart. If he was tricked by her sister in the future, please don't blame it on her. Since Sunny Jia was prepared to face the future, Jingwan didn't say anything more. It was meaningless. Jingwan looked at her face again. In the future, don't do this kind of thing again. It wasn't good to hurt oneself to achieve one's goal. This time, it was just a coincidence. I just made the disaster that I couldn't avoid more serious. I never thought of doing it on purpose. Sister Jia, it's good that you know. Sister Wan, are you worried that I will do something extreme if I encounter something in the future? No, just like what you told me before. It's okay to cry occasionally, but you have to find the right person to cry to. You have to cry to the person who cares about you. It's the same principle. If you lose your value, even if you die, some people may not shed a single tear. Young Miss, Duchess Ding is here. Suddenly, Mama Gong's voice sounded from outside. Sunny Jia was stunned. Although she knew that someone would come, she didn't expect her mother to come in person. In Sunny Jia's opinion, the most likely person to come was her sister-in-law. Taking advantage of the time, Jingwan quickly put away all the used papers on the table. She didn't hide them and just casually covered them with white paper. She would take them away later. She calmly drank tea and ate her tea. She didn't feel guilty or flustered at all because she had done something bad. Sun Yijia felt ashamed of herself for being inferior to her calmness. After that, the people who were chased out by Sun Yijia came in one after another. If the madam came and saw that all the servants were outside, she would definitely be at the front. Then, a large group of people came in. Sun Yijia suddenly felt that she was overthinking. She originally thought that her mother actually cared about her daughter very much, but in fact, that wasn't the case. Her sisters-in-law were all here. What was going on? Were they here to laugh at her? Even if these so-called sisters-in-law wanted to come in the name of caring for her sister-in-law, as long as her mother's attitude was firm, she could completely refuse them. Her sisters-in-law didn't have the guts to disobey her mother. Oh my, did our sister Jia really hurt her face? What should we do? A young woman who was dressed very solemnly and gorgeously was the first to enter the room. Her tone and expression were unmistakably concerned, but the gloating in her eyes was too obvious. She poked Sun Yijia's face with her long fingernails. Sun Yijia evaded her with an expressionless face and looked coldly at her fourth sister-in-law. Obviously, Sun Yijia was still high and mighty and arrogant even though her face was disfigured. This made the young woman furious. She lowered her voice and said, "Sister-in-law, I'd like to see how long Sister Jia, who is turned into an ugly monster, can remain arrogant." Fourth sister-in-law, mother is here. It's your turn to walk in front. A group of people came in later, and another woman behind Duchess Ding spoke up. "Oh, mother, don't be angry. Your daughter-in-law was just worried about Sister Jia for a moment. I definitely didn't. Enough?" Duchess Ding waved her hand impatiently, and then her gaze fell on Sun Yijia. She looked at her face. Although there was concern and worry, it was very limited. There were more complicated expressions mixed with all kinds of emotions. Sun Yijia greeted her with a cold expression, just like how she usually greeted her mother. Duchess Ding's lips moved, but there were some words that she didn't say out loud. Before she came, she had already had a fierce argument with Duchess Ding about her. In the end, she compromised. "Since you're injured, take good care of yourself. Don't think so much." Duchess Ding was about to ask Sun Yijia's wet nurse about the specific condition of the injury on her face and whether it was really impossible for her to recover. However, she inadvertently found that there was an outsider here. Seeing that there was a white cloth wrapped around her neck, she was one of the girls who had an accident. "Which family are you from?" Although Jingwan had been to Duke Ding's mansion, the only person who had an impression of her was Sun Yijia's eldest sister-in-law. She was usually smooth and slick, but at this time, she chose to remain silent. Jingwan of the Luo family greets Duchess Ding. When everyone heard this, the expressions on their faces were a little subtle. Duchess Ding's eyes were even a little unfriendly. "You're the one who asked Big Sister Jia to come out? Why is Big Sister Jia's face hurt? Why are you standing there? Oh, by the way, it seems that you fell into the river below. You're really lucky and tough." That pair of beautiful eyes now had an irritating look of scrutiny. She looked at Jingwan as if she was looking at something strange. Jingwan knew very well that there was definitely more than one person who had similar thoughts. It was nothing more than venting their anger and giving them a target to vent their anger. However, Jingwan's good temper was also relatively speaking. If you treated her with courtesy, she would naturally treat you equally. Jingwan glanced at the others. There were many people who wanted to watch a good show, including Duchess Ding, who looked indifferent. However, Sun Ijia's face was a little ugly, and anger appeared in her eyes. Seeing that she was about to lose her temper, Jingwan spoke first. May I ask if you're speaking on behalf of Duke Ding's mansion, or yourself? The other party was stunned. Obviously, she didn't expect Jingwan to react like this. So what if I'm speaking on behalf of Duke Ding's mansion? So what if I'm speaking on behalf of myself? Her expression became contemptuous. In her opinion, there was no difference between the two. Duchess Ding frowned slightly and looked at Jingwan with her eyes wide open. Sister Wan originally planned to come to White Dragon Temple today, but I brought forward the time to yesterday afternoon. According to what you said, am I not the scourge? Among the 4 people in the carriage, I was the least injured. You are all cursing in your hearts why I didn't fall to my death directly, right? I let you down. Who told me to be so lucky? Even if you all died, it wouldn't be my turn. Because she deliberately lowered her voice, she even sounded like a malicious ghost who wanted to take people's lives. It was really frightening that a person who didn't get angry suddenly got angry. Ijia, look at yourself now. Why don't you shut up? Sun Ijia suddenly turned her head to look at Duchess Ding. What do I look like? If I'm not the same as what you think, it's naturally not good. Mother, don't think that I don't know what you and my father are thinking and what you want to do. I'm already like this. As she spoke, she covered her injured face with tears in her eyes. Anyway, I have nothing left. If anyone dares to insult me, don't blame me for doing something that will make Duke Ding's mansion lose face and make you regret it for the rest of your life. Ijia. Perhaps Sun Ijia had hit the nail on the head. When she saw Sun Ijia's disheartened look, her heart began to ache. After all, she was her only daughter. Although she had done her best to cultivate her for a purpose, she had still put in a lot of effort. Don't be silly. Who would dare to abuse you? Don't do anything stupid, okay? Sun Ijia coldly twitched the corner of her mouth, making it clear that she didn't believe it. Duchess Ding suddenly felt helpless to her daughter and couldn't help but soften her tone. Come home with me first, okay? We can talk about it when we get back. Go back? You'll ground me when we get back, lest I, an ugly person, go out and be pointed at and humiliated? Or do you want to go all the way and marry me off far away so that I can never step into the capital again? Why do you think so? Isn't that so? Mother, do you dare to swear that you and father don't have such plans? Swear on the lives of your children and grandchildren. If you lie, you'll have no descendants. Duchess Ding could no longer maintain her composure. Her eyes were burning with anger. Sun Ijia, how can you say such vicious words? Your brothers doted on you for nothing. Your nephews like you so much. How can you curse them? I'm vicious? I just want you to swear on them. If you and father really don't have such plans, you'll have a clear conscience. Duchess Ding was suddenly speechless and couldn't say anything. You have nothing to say? Tears fell from Sun Ijia's eyes as she recounted her endless grievances and sorrow. You abandoned me first. You didn't want me first. You used to hold me in the palm of your hand and always gave me the best because I was valuable. You didn't raise a daughter, but a precious object, waiting for the day to exchange for the greatest benefits for you. But after all, you gave birth to me and raised me. I should repay you. So I did whatever you asked me to do without any complaints. But now, my face is ruined and I'm worthless. Not only do you not pity me or comfort me, but you also sprinkle salt on my wound. It's said that kittens and puppies will develop feelings for each other after being raised for a long time. I feel that I'm not even as good as a kitten or puppy. The more she spoke, the more indignant she became. Jingwan had been looking at her coldly before, but when she saw Sun Ijia's face begin to bleed again, she hurried forward and said, Sister Jia, don't say it. Don't say it. Duchess Ding stood there in a daze. She probably never thought that her daughter would have such thoughts in her heart, but there seemed to be nothing wrong with what she said. Because of this, she was deeply touched. Thinking about herself, wasn't she like this all her life? Was she wronged at that time? Was she resentful? She knew that kind of sorrow, but she still heartlessly wanted her daughter to repeat it. Jingwan's anxious voice woke her up. Ijia, it's my fault. I won't abandon you. I promise you that that day will never come. Believe me, okay? Duchess Ding couldn't help but cry. It wasn't that she hadn't cried all these years, but she cried in front of Duke Ding. Her heart was cold and hard at that time, but now she was really crying for her daughter and for herself. Sunny Jia shook off her hand and buried her head in Jingwan's neck. Mother, you can go out first. I want to be alone for a while. Okay, okay. I'll listen to you. Don't talk anymore. Be careful of pain. It's not good to bleed too much. She wanted to say be careful of her face, but she was worried that it would touch her heart again. However, she was worried about leaving just like that. Madam, you might as well go out first. Leave Sister Jia to me. I'll persuade her, Jingwan said when she saw that she was at a loss. At this moment, she really cared about Sunny Jia. Okay, I'll have to trouble you, Miss Luo, https://11/11807/6652958. Thinking about what her young lady said to the madam before, she could not help but feel extremely distressed. Perhaps her young lady had always been suffering in her heart, but she had never realized it. Now, she was unprecedentedly grateful to the third young lady of the Luo family. We always thought that my younger sister was cold and didn't like to get close to others. Now it seems that we were wrong. It's obvious that we didn't do enough. Our indifference made her heart cold. Under the pagoda tree in the courtyard outside, Sun Yilin stood beside Duchess Ding. Through the window, he saw that his younger sister was so attached to an outsider. At the same time, he felt slightly bitter in his heart, but at the same time, he yearned for the warmth between them. Miss Luo and my younger sister have only known each other for a few days. What does this mean? Third Miss Luo's methods are too good, and she's too good at pleasing others. So, she can even easily win over someone like my younger sister? Or is my younger sister an ungrateful wretch? Mother, your first reaction is similar, right? No. Duchess Ding denied it quickly and anxiously. Sun Yilin chuckled. He was one of the most romantic figures in the whole capital. His laughter was naturally very lethal. Many maids around him blushed. However, Duchess Ding, who was standing beside him, felt that he was mocking her. For some reason, there was a little helplessness and sadness in his laughter. She wanted to say something more, but she couldn't open her mouth and didn't know what to say. She had always been a strict and strong mother. She would only tell her children what to do, rather than patiently listen to their inner thoughts and then explain it to them in a soft voice. Mother, do you know why my younger sister proposed to come to White Dragon Temple in advance? It's because of me. Because I want to come. I have to rush back today and work for His Majesty tomorrow. Duchess Ding looked at him. She was not a person who could be easily fooled. If he really just wanted to come to White Dragon Temple, he could invite his friends instead of following them on the pretext of protecting his younger sister. He also wouldn't use his younger sister's mouth to lead a group of girls to travel in advance. Why? She thought of a possibility. Mother, according to fourth sister-in-law's words, the one who caused yesterday's incident is the culprit. If that's the case, am I the one with the toughest fate? In fact, I also think this is the most reasonable. After all, I blocked my eldest brother's way and covered the light of all the other brothers, making them pearls covered in dust. See, I am such a bane to my brothers and sisters. Sun Yilin answered the question very calmly. Nonsense. I know whether you blocked your eldest brother's way or not. As for the others, what pearls covered in dust? They are clearly a group of stubborn stones. It has nothing to do with you. Nonsense. When fourth sister-in-law said so, Mother, you didn't say that she was talking nonsense. Instead, you seemed to agree with what she said. You can't have a completely different attitude just because it's your son now. You don't have to be so obvious when you help your relatives instead of reason. Duchess Ding's lips trembled as she looked at her beloved son. Yilin, I know that you blame your father and me because of what happened to your sister. Are you going to talk to me like this just because of that? Aren't you cutting my heart with a knife? Sun Yilin still smiled. Mother, what's wrong with you? You make it sound so serious. Look, am I not the same as usual? It's not good to be different from what you think. Duchess Ding suddenly thought of what her daughter had said just now. When she heard her son's words, she almost covered her chest with her hand. Unconsciously, she and her children had been so estranged from each other. Mother, don't be like this. Several sisters-in-law are still watching over there. Maybe they will think that I have done something disgraceful and then spread it everywhere. My good reputation will be severely tarnished. The crime of being unfilial is really too serious. Duchess Ding subconsciously restrained the expression on her face. Sun Yilan's smile became gentler. Duchess Ding inexplicably felt that her son was a little scary. Mother, you just asked me why. I'll tell you now. It's because I like the third miss of the Luo family. I want to get as close to her as possible while I still have some time. Let me guess. Are you saying in your heart that the third miss of the Luo family is really not a good person? It's obvious that she wants to use Yijia as a springboard to seduce me. Looking at her unpredictable expression, Sun Yilan smiled helplessly. You're the only one who treats your son as a treasure. Maybe in other people's hearts, I'm just a grass. My son is so outstanding. It's normal for any girl to like him. Yes, so it's normal for the third miss of the Luo family to like him. Even if she wants to get close to me through my sister, it's reasonable. Unfortunately, the only impression I give her is probably that I'm the brother of her good sister. Mother, are you thinking again? Who does she think she is? Why can't she like my son? Duchess Ding's face turned pale when her thoughts were guessed again and again. Last night, Mother and Father discussed it for a long time. There are some bruises around your eyes. Maybe you didn't sleep all night. After my sister has no value in marriage, you will not let go of my marriage easily. The reason why I tell you this is to let you be mentally prepared. Unless the third miss of the Luo family is unwilling, I will marry no one but her. If you agree, everyone will be happy. If you don't agree, I naturally have to do something to achieve my goal. Originally, before my sister's accident, I wanted to take it slowly, but I suddenly realized that if my methods are too gentle, others will think that you are a pushover. Mother, don't try to secretly ruin the reputation of the third miss of the Luo family, and don't think about doing the same thing. Using Cousin Ruyu's hands, you will embarrass those girls who you don't like, but try to get close to me. You know, Cousin Ruyu is now so hated among the noble ladies in the capital. Mother, you have to take at least half of the responsibility. Mother, I admit that your methods are good, but in my opinion, it's still a bit crude. In the past, I would intervene and stop you whenever I saw you. Most of the time, I pretended not to know and just tried to avoid those girls as much as possible because you are my mother and Ruyu is my cousin, and they are just outsiders. But after all, they are innocent. It's just because they are in love for the first time, and they gave me gifts in a roundabout way to avoid private dealings. They didn't do anything immoral or intolerable. I hope that Mother can be merciful in the future, and if the same method is used on third Miss Luo, I probably won't just stop her. You have to understand your son. After all, it's not easy for me to fall in love with her. Duchess Ding suddenly felt that she was like a clown in her son's eyes. At the same time, her son was not really obedient and docile. He just hid his sharp claws and teeth. Once he showed them, it might be as simple as seeing blood. I know that once I take a liking to her, it will probably be for the rest of my life. So, I don't care about her reputation, I don't care about her appearance, and I don't even care if she is a virgin. Even if I die, I will marry her memorial tablet. This was a real threat. Even if Duchess Ding really wanted to do something, she didn't dare to do it. If her son really wanted her, and she really married into Duke Ding's mansion in the future, the more unbearable she was, the more others would only laugh at Duke Ding's mansion and her son. What I'm going to do next may make my brother feel threatened. Mother, you might as well tell him and Father directly that I'm not interested in Duke Ding's mansion. But if he really doesn't believe it and insists on making trouble for me, and Father tries his best to suppress me, then don't blame me for being impolite and really competing with him. Over the years, I have endured enough. If one day we really kill each other, it will be because of them. Duchess Ding looked at him. Before they set off yesterday, he was still a familiar person. In the blink of an eye, he had become so unfamiliar. Her son had really grown up and his wings were full. She could no longer hold him in the palm of her hand. She didn't know whether she should be happy or disappointed. Sun Yilin glanced at the people in the room again. Let my sister recuperate in White Dragon Temple. When she returns to Duke Ding's mansion, her wound will heal slowly. No one in the world will feel sorry for her, but there will always be one person who will. I'll go back first. With that, he bowed to Duchess Ding. Without waiting for her response, he turned around and left. He was straightforward and ruthless. Sun Yijia had enough of being in Jingwan's arms. She raised her head and happened to see Sun Yilin's back as he left, as well as her mother's side profile, which looked like she had lost her soul. I don't know what my fifth brother said, but mother seems to have been provoked quite a bit. You were not to be outdone before. Sun Yijia wanted to say something, but she saw that the maids in the room were still in a daze after being provoked just now. They had been serving her with all their might before and were also loyal. But now the situation was different. It was not a good choice to continue to follow her master, who had no future. If they still followed her wholeheartedly, then she would do her best to find a good home for them. If they had other thoughts, then they should leave as soon as possible and go their separate ways. All of you, go out. Madam was still outside. Wouldn't it be asking for trouble if they left Miss out at this time? It turns out that you are serving me on the surface, but in fact, you are just listening to my mother's words? Sun Yijia said softly enough for the maids to hear. They wanted to hurriedly deny it, but their master did not give them a chance to speak. Get out. She flipped the table. Seeing that Sun Yijia was angry, they were all frightened. The wet nurse was the calmest. To put it bluntly, she had raised Sun Yijia as her own daughter. When Sun Yijia suffered, she felt more distressed than anyone else. Even if her temperament had changed greatly now, she thought it was reasonable. Without saying anything, she took the lead to crouch down and leave. With someone taking the lead, the other maids felt as if they had been pardoned. It was still the same saying that it was terrible when a person who was not angry suddenly became angry. Sun Yijia used Jingwan to block the view of the people outside and blinked at Jingwan. Did I pretend well? Jingwan poked her forehead. You know it in your heart. Don't wait for me to expose you. It was normal for a person to become gloomy, irritable, or ruthless when they encountered a big change. Jingwan actually agreed with Sun Yijia's decision to cover herself with such a layer of protection. As the saying goes, the soft is afraid of the hard is afraid of the reckless is afraid of the unreasonable, and the unreasonable is afraid of the reckless. As long as Sun Yijia was willing to risk everything, how many people in Ding General Manor were willing to risk their lives? Probably none. In this way, she could be the king of Ding General Manor. Who would dare to humiliate her? However, this also needed a process. Sun Yijia was not a person who could act. When she confronted her mother before, if she did not have real feelings as the foundation and burst out her inner thoughts, she could not achieve the effect if she just pretended. Her fourth sister-in-law was purely a bitch who was asking for a beating. Sun Yijia's eyes dimmed. Sister Wan, I'm very sad. I'm really sad. You knew this from the beginning. Now you just exposed it. After being sad, life will go on as usual. Sister Wan, you're so heartless. Sun Yijia's sadness was ruthlessly dispersed by Jingwan, so she looked at her with an accusing face. That's not it. There are more heartless things to come. So, if you don't want to be hurt by my ruthlessness, stay away from me as soon as possible. But I've been trapped in your gentleness and can't extricate myself. Even if you suddenly become ruthless, I've decided not to marry for the rest of my life and to rely on you for the rest of my life. What does your marriage have to do with relying on me for the rest of your life? However, Jingwan suddenly thought that Sun Yijia's idea could be realized. She could marry into Ding General Manor. Looking at Sun Yijia's expression, she seemed to, don't think too much. I'm serious. Sister Wan, you know what I mean, right? My fifth brother. Jingwan pressed a finger on her lips. Your mother is already here. I think people from the Luo family should also be here. I'll go back and take a look. What you need to do now is to obediently recover from your injuries. Eat and sleep as you should. When you return to the capital, you won't have a peaceful life. Sun Yijia saw that Jingwan was firm and knew that there was no point in continuing to persuade her. I'll walk you out. Okay. Jingwan didn't forget to roll up the paper she had written before and put it in her sleeve to take away. The two of them walked out arm in arm. The people who were whispering in the courtyard immediately shut their mouths and secretly looked over. It was obvious that they were talking bad about her just now. Sun Yijia carried her noble and cold demeanor. Compared to before, she was no longer cold when looking at people. Instead, she was gloomy. Mother, Sister Jia's temper is not good now. Not only did she hit people, but she also smashed things. If outsiders know about it, I don't know what they will say about our Ding general manner. Sun Yijia's fourth sister-in-law still had red marks on her face. Obviously, the two slaps just now made her resentment and hatred almost to the sky. Enough. If it weren't for your mouth, would Yijia have hit you? You'd better behave yourself in the future, or I'll have someone slap you directly. Duchess Ding looked at her coldly. Her mouth not only implicated her daughter, but also her most outstanding son. Sure enough, she was too tolerant in daily life, so they dared to be so unscrupulous. She was just the daughter-in-law of a concubine's son. How dare she try to climb over her daughter? However, she had a good-looking sister-in-law. Did she think that without her daughter above her, that little bitch could stand out? She was really too stupid. She was actually compromised by a few words from the Duke. Whatever concubine's daughter, she was still her daughter. As long as she married well, she could be of help to her son and also to the Empress. But the fact was, nothing had happened yet, and she was so arrogant that she dared to step on her daughter in front of her. If those bitches of a concubine really got up, who knew how arrogant they would be? They enjoyed everything her daughter had, and even turned around to bite her daughter. In that case, why should she help them up? Bitches would be bitches for a lifetime. Considering that they were also the Duke's daughters, she was already very kind to them by not letting them be like their bitch concubine. Under her nose, they wanted to climb up the social ladder? They wanted to replace her daughter? In their dreams. As daughters-in-law, they had been scolded by their mother-in-law before. But at this moment, her mother-in-law seemed to be colder than before. Sun Yijia's sister-in-law couldn't help shivering and didn't dare to speak again. But her lowered eyes contained deep hatred. She deserved it. She ran into Sun Yilin. Since Sun Yilin cared about Jingwan, he naturally wouldn't let others bully her. Although he didn't go in, he heard everything that happened in the room just now. The situation didn't allow him to do so, so he restrained himself. But it didn't mean that he couldn't deal with a sister-in-law who was dispensable in his eyes. As long as he insulted himself a little, his mother would trample that so-called sister-in-law to death. Don't blame him for being despicable and shameless. He was even more calculative with a woman. A man who couldn't even protect the person he liked. Could he still be considered a real man? What's more, Duchess Ding, who had been provoked by her children, was helpless in front of them. The others were just right for her to vent her anger. Whoever ran into them first would die. Yijia. In the blink of an eye, Duchess Ding became a loving mother again, but she didn't know what to say to Sun Yijia now. Sun Yijia curled the corners of her mouth sarcastically. She was used to seeing her mother flaunt her power. It was the first time that her mother protected her so unabashedly when she did something wrong. Mother, you are very familiar with this place. Help yourself. I'll send Sister Wan away first. Her daughter, who used to be well-behaved and obedient, suddenly seemed to have changed into a different person. Her words were always harsh and sarcastic. No one would feel good in their heart. However, because of this, Duchess Ding thought that her actions had hurt her daughter's heart. Instead, she cared more about her daughter's thoughts. Duchess Ding glanced at Jingwan. She now had very complicated feelings about Jingwan. Her children's hearts had been hooked by her. Such a person probably didn't want her to be her daughter-in-law. If her son was partial to his daughter-in-law in everything, it would be strange if she, as a mother, felt good. But now the situation was that her son protected her and even threatened to marry no one but her. Her daughter needed her and didn't give a good face to anyone except her. As a mother, she had to put her aside. She was even more terrible than those seductive vixens. Jingwan felt that Duchess Ding's eyes were getting weirder and weirder. Did something happen that she didn't know about? Sister Jia, you don't have to send me off. Have a good talk with your mother. How can there be overnight hatred between mother and daughter? If you keep it in your heart, you'll never be able to get the right answer. However, your mother is different. She has decades of experience and has seen many things. Even if your thoughts aren't accepted by the world, she's the one who gave birth to you after carrying you for 10 months. You're her flesh and blood. Naturally, she won't be heartless and ignore your feelings. She'll give you her opinion, and even if it's not what you want, she'll still be able to guide you. It'll be beneficial for your entire life. Sunny Jia didn't expect that before leaving, Jingwan could still say such words. This was not only said to her, but also to her mother. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't grateful. No daughter wanted to quarrel with her parents like they were enemies. This was not only a matter of filial piety, but also a relationship of more than 10 years. How could she give it up so easily? Jingwan also saw this point, so she said such words. Moreover, with the protection of Duchess Ding, Sunny Jia's life would be much better. Well, I'll go first. Jingwan patted her hand and bowed to Duchess Ding. Goodbye. Duchess Ding was both shocked and touched. Her impression of Jingwan changed again, becoming more and more complicated and indescribable. They didn't look away until Jingwan disappeared from their sight and then looked at each other at the same time. Sunny Jia was still a little angry and turned her face away awkwardly. Jia, are you really going to treat me like this all the time? I know I'm wrong and I've wronged you, but fortunately, it hasn't happened yet. There's still a chance to change. Won't you even give me this chance? I promise you that those things won't happen. You're still the most honorable, legitimate daughter of Duke Ding's mansion. You're the apple of my eye. No one can belittle you. Jia, Duchess Ding said, and reached out to pull her. Sunny Jia hesitated for a while. Finally, she couldn't help but throw herself into Duchess Ding's arms and cry uncontrollably. Mother, don't cry, don't cry. Be careful of the wound. Duchess Ding kept comforting her, but she also made her cry. The mother and daughter cried together, and the servants also shed tears, but some of them almost tore the handkerchief in their hands. The current situation was definitely not what they wanted to see. If they didn't trample on Sunny Jia, how could they seek benefits? However, in the face of Duchess Ding, they were helpless. As the culprit, Jingwan was naturally hated. The third miss of the Luo family is really extraordinary. At such a young age, her wisdom and insight are really shameful. The second sister-in-law of the Sun family, who had always been taciturn, said to her eldest sister-in-law, "The first time I saw her, I felt that this girl was far beyond her peers. Now it seems that I have underestimated her." Eldest sister-in-law, if she enters the gate of Duke Ding's mansion, she will be a big threat to you. Although they didn't hear what Sun Yilan's mother-in-law and uncle said before, they, who had been paying attention to them, caught Sun Yilan's occasional look. Same to you. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.